Good morning and welcome to Online Church, our first online church experience for our community. Thank you for tuning in, and today's message is going to be a little bit different to how we plan to implement our online church into the future, but we had to do this one a little bit last minute with our decision from the government coming so late. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I do hope and pray that you're keeping safe throughout this time, but hopefully still engaging with people as well. Today we have a guest speaker who's going to come and speak to us at the church, but she's very graciously recorded her message for us. Her name is Emma Brisby, and she's from Compassion. And one of the reasons we wanted her to come and speak to us was that we've been looking at how to launch this year, how to launch into whatever it is that God has for us. And we don't want to necessarily just look locally. Of course, we think it's important to launch locally into what God has for us and for the community here, but sometimes He wants us to launch a little bit further, maybe even internationally. And so we've asked Emma to come and speak to us about Compassion and some options that might be available for us to launch into the future, if that's where God directs us. So let's have a listen to what she has to say, and also listen to any promptings that God might be placing on our hearts as well. At the end of this talk, I will also have some options, if you choose, that you can support some Compassion children.
Good morning, Tuncurry Church of Christ. It's Emma Brisby here, and I come to you from a pre-recorded message. As you all know, there's the world events going on at the moment, the COVID-19, and so this is what we've done to try and bring you a little bit of church joy today. And I've all the technology things. I'm in the technology industry, and this is the best we could do at the last minute. So I've got my little slides here, and I've got my little PowerPoint helper going to help me along. And again, my name's Emma Brisby, and here's a photo of my family. I've been married to the amazing Matthew Brisby for almost 19 years. We have 4 children together. I'm a local business owner. My favourite colour is yellow, and my passion in life is Compassion. Compassion Australia and the Compassion Sponsor Children. The message I thought I'd share with you today is a well-known parable that Jesus taught, the parable of the sower. And we hear this in Matthew 13 and also Luke 8. I'm sure most of us here have heard it, and today I'm going to read it to you from Matthew 13. A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on the rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let him hear. The great thing about this parable is that Jesus explains it to us in a few following verses. It says, "Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word at once and receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the world, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful." But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Now, being a Christian, I'd always heard this parable and thought, great, I'm definitely the 4th seed. The seed that has fallen on good soil, and it's my job to sow more good seed. A couple of years ago, I was driving along Commerce Street in Taree. I drive a lot for work. I was listening to Rima FM. And during these drives, I pray to God, I listen to messages, and sometimes just have some quiet time. On this particular day when I was driving, I heard this parable on the radio. It's something I've heard 100 times before, and it's never really hit me or spoken to me in a new way. On this particular day, boom, I had this feeling. That revelation, that God feeling, that feeling that you know when you get it, there's only two options. You do something with it, or you don't do something with it. What hit me in this parable of the sower was the third seed, thrown onto the good soil. The seed that grows well and flourishes, but it's choked by the thorns and the weeds. I hadn't thought too much about the weeds before, but after this God feeling, I knew I needed to dive a little bit deeper into this. I looked up a few translations of what Jesus explains about the weeds. I read the NIV translation just before. The Message Bible says, "The seed cast in the weeds is the person who hears the kingdom news, but the weeds of worry and delusions about getting more and wanting everything under the sun strangle what was heard, and nothing comes of it." The NIV in Luke 8:14 says, "The seed that fell among thorns stands for those who hear, but as they go on their way, they are choked by life's worries, riches and pleasures, and they do not mature." I think we get the pictures in all these versions and the different translations. It's the same message that Jesus is giving us. The thorns that choke these seeds in the good soil is worries and cares of riches and wealth. You know, this week, some people have had cares of where are we going to find the toilet paper? How do we survive if we can only buy 1 or 2 bags of frozen vegetables, things like that. It's just everyday stuff that we're living with in Australia. It's all normal stuff for us. We're all living in wealth. We are living in worrying times right now. Just turn on any news program, any social media feed, talk to anybody down the street. It's easy to see the world is broken, and of course it's a worry. Here we live in a Western society that allows us to be rich. We can get real food from the supermarkets nearly every day. We flush our toilets with drinking water. How crazy is that? We can access medicine from doctors and pharmacies and hospitals with ease, other than this week, and because these have been unprecedented times. Yet we're still living in a society that wants more. We have to keep up with the Joneses. We have to have the best. There are so many verses in the Bible that I love about bearing good fruit. Some will be on the slide here. In John 15:5, Jesus says, "I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit." I don't want worries or this pursuit of more to hinder God's fruitfulness for me and his world. So how do we bear good fruit? How do we make sure that we are the good seed in the good soil? How do we make sure we're doing all we can with all that we have? Jesus has given us all talents. He's blessed us with different giftings. And I believe if we can all do a little bit or a lot with what we've been given, with the giftings that we've been blessed with, that through Jesus we can change the world. And like Jesus explains, the good seed will produce a crop yielding way more than what we could sow. I love that in the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, the disciples say, "Jesus, here, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish." They didn't say, "Hey, let's keep a loaf. Jesus, you can have 4 loaves and 2 fish, or 1 fish and 3 loaves." They chose to give it all. They chose to give everything they had and then let Jesus do the miracles. After they'd fed the mammoth crowd with all this food from the little bit that the disciples had given, they collected back more than what they'd given Jesus in the first place. How incredible is that? We don't do this thing in life alone. We do it with Jesus. We're his hands, we're his feet, and we're called to be salt and light. I hope, like the loaves and fish that day with the disciples, I hope I can be this free every time Jesus calls me to give him what I have for him to use. I start by sharing this message at the start, the one that's really hit me, this revelation God gave me, so that when I share with you some of what I do with compassion, that you'll see that this is not me doing it. This is not just me. This is not just other people that are doing it with me. But I choose to give my hands and feet to Jesus and let him do the change. I'm hoping that he's the one that will yield the massive harvest. We've got the slide here of Everett Swanson. The areas compassion work in are all places of poverty. The people in these areas are sons and daughters of Christ. They were born into the country with need, just like we were born into Australia, the country of plenty. Their circumstances are due to just ongoing terrible circumstances that come with living in that area of poverty. We have generation after generation living in these areas with no hope. And mostly no help as well. I'm sure you've all heard about compassion. I'll just give you a little bit of a brief history about this amazing ministry and this amazing man, Everett Swanson. It started in South Korea in 1952 when Everett, who was an American man, saw bodies of small children in the gutters in the middle of winter. He decided to do what he could by helping 35 orphans, so starting with 35. By 1977, just 25 years later, there were already 25,000 children in compassion. In the same year of 1977, a Newcastle couple brought a compassion to Australia, and in 2020, we now have over 1.9 million children in compassion sponsorship. However, compassion still focus on each one individually. That one is what they need to focus on. Each child is cared for and loved. Compassion has always been unashamedly Christ-centered, child-focused, and church-based. They, like me, believe that poverty is not fair, and it's also not what Jesus wants for his children. Our particular journey with compassion started in 2004. We had 2 small children who are grown up now, and we just bought our very own first home, which is a very small unit in Taree. We'd had a chat and we felt that if we could afford to buy a unit, that we could afford to support a child in sponsorship. And we contacted one of my favourite people, Dennis Burns. I'm sure you all know Dennis. And we said, hey, we'd like to sponsor a child. And he brought us this photo of a scrawny little boy who was only 4 years old at the time. His name was John Benedict. He was so tiny and he was too small, he wouldn't write to us. So I wrote to his mum letter for the first few years until he was old enough to write for himself. He was very sick with asthma right up until he was 7 years old, and he came close to death a few times during that period, the first few years of our sponsorship. We formed a great relationship with him over the last 15 years and also with his family. Jump our story forward to 2012, and a long story short, our store won Store of the Year, and with that came a prize to visit our sponsor children in northern Indonesia. We decided we would sponsor another child, one from Indonesia, and our head office also blessed us with another child from that area, so we were going to visit too. So in August 2012, my husband Matt and I travelled with our work family to Medan, which is in northern Sumatra of Indonesia, and we visited our 2 sponsor children, Stephen and Suchi. I'm not sure I ever cried so much before this day. It was seeing all the first-class people that were living in the third world poverty. Men and women that are like you and me, except they don't have dreams and they don't have hopes for themselves. Heck, they don't even have food for tomorrow, so what would they even need dreams for anyway? I just realised for the first time that poverty had an actual face. The face that really stuck with me was Suchi's. And this is precious little Suchi. In 2012, I've put all the original photos, and one extra little photo in the middle here is when we went to visit her in November just gone. In 2012 though, she was almost 4 years old. She wouldn't talk to us the whole entire visit. She was very shy, she was very reserved. The only thing I heard her say was when I heard a motorbike go past, she ran to the door and called out to her grandfather and said, "My mama Emma and my papa Matthew are here, you have to come and see them." Except of course I didn't know what she was saying because it was in Indonesian. This little girl had my heart. She's one of 7 children. Their dad unloads big supply boats that come into port only 4 times per year. They unload the boat in a team of men. About 7 days it takes them. They get paid $60 for a week, and they work from sun up till sundown. When you work it out, it actually equates to about 70 cents an hour for this work. And there's only 3 to 4 boats that come in a year. Yes, the cost of living is cheaper there. Their house rental is only $150 for a year, and they struggle to pay for that. However, when you go just a couple of minutes from where they live, I still had to pay $7 for a Starbucks coffee, so it is far from being an affordable area to live. One of the interpreters on this trip asked me, "Emma, what do you think of their living conditions?" And I like to do what Jesus does, which is ask a question back. And I said to this Indonesian lady, "What do you think of their living conditions?" She said to me, "No one, especially Indonesians, should have to live like that." She says, "I don't know how they survive. Surely God is the one that keeps them." So when the local says this to me, I start thinking about the impact of compassion in that particular area. The schooling it provides, the extra tuition, they do things like computer classes, videography, dancing, English lessons. They get nourishing food, they have medical checkups, and they're also provided medical checkups and food to family members as well. The mentoring they get from Christian men and women wanting to sow into their lives is invaluable. The parents get health lessons, and the mums and dads feel invited to all things, including church. Now, I love all these things, the pillars for the families to get out of poverty. However, there are 2 things compassion provides that make all the difference: Christ and us, the church. The children learn about Jesus and his love for them and the plan for their lives and their worth in Christ. And the relationship with their sponsor, the letters and love and encouragement, that agape love that a Christian in another part of the world is showing them, is amazing. There are countless stories of children whose letters from their sponsors are the only things that kept them alive in troubled times, and a knowledge of a sponsor rooting for them in another part of the world is what pushed them to keep going on those days. And you know what I'm called to do in all of this, and you're called to do in all of this? This massive problem of poverty and injustice, these good people in just a very bad situation, a situation that we can't even imagine while we're living in Australia. I'm called to do what I can with what I've got, and you're called to do what you can with what you've got. We let Jesus do the miracles. I came back from my 2012 trip and called compassion. Firstly, we took over the financial support for the second child that our head office was going to pay for. After we'd seen how they were living, I knew we could make room for one more. Secondly, I thought I need to get more sponsors for these kids. So along we went for the journey, and 42 kids were sponsored out in the first 3 weeks. We've also started several church partnerships from different areas of interest for different churches. We've had one church take more than 50 sponsor children from an area in West Timor that I was so blessed to be able to visit in November recently. I also get to help with my work partnership twice every year, and help with that particular partnership as well, which is so good. It really helps to be able to tell people that you've been to that area and you can see they're real children, not just a picture in a packet. Since our visit in 2012, I've visited the area in northern Sumatra 5 times. Such a joy to see these sponsor children growing up, and it's not lost on me that I'm in a very privileged position where I've been able to visit those children. It's just such a joy. I have 1,000 pictures like these ones I've got up here. It's hard just to choose a few for you. I've got thousands of them. Each picture, each family, each trip has hundreds of stories that I could tell you. Today, I just wanted to choose a couple of my favourite photos for you. Now, I haven't changed the whole world yet, but I intend on changing even just a small part of Indonesia, even just a small part of Africa, even just a small part of South America. I want to answer the call that God gives us in Isaiah 58, 6-7, and it says this: "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? And when you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? By doing what I can and giving it to Jesus, we'll see miracles. Miracles like our John Benedict, our very first sponsor child I told you about before. He turned 20 this year in February. He's an adult now. He's graduated high school last year in July. He graduated with honours in the top 10 of his class, which has hundreds of people in it. He didn't have an asthma attack after he turned 7. His dad is now a casual teacher in a high school. His mum manages a very small shopping centre in Philippines. After John starting his first 5 years of life in a super dodgy shed, which it's going to be very hard to see, I'm sorry, but there's a little tiny dodgy shed, and that's where he spent the first 5 years of his life. Then they moved to a room above a friend's house, and they lived in this single room for a number of years. They now have a unit a little larger than mine and Matt's very first unit when we first sponsored him. He's a passionate young man who loves God and loves his family. Now, from a small child who we thought would die from asthma at the age of 5, who lived in a shed, whose whole family were in crippling poverty, we have this miracle. I was blessed to visit John Benedict on his 16th birthday, which was 4 years ago. I took my son Sam, who was 13 at the time. And on the second day we were with him, I said, "Am I anything like you imagined?" He said, "You are exactly like I imagined from the letters you wrote me." And I'll tell you something, he was exactly like what I was expecting after I'd been writing him letters for so long as well, which was very surprising to me because some of our letters are very short and some of our letters are a little bit longer, but you just don't understand the impact that is made when you choose to sow into that child and share your life with them and write them the letters. My heart is overjoyed that John and his family won't be in poverty anymore. God took our $12 a week, our willing hearts, our willing hands, and a whole heap of mentors in the Compassion Project in the Philippines who also gave their hearts and hands to God as well, and we have this miracle happening. This is happening all over the developing world through compassion, and if you feel led by God today, you can do what you can with what you've got by sponsoring a child as well. I have on the slide here 5 young men and women. They're all from Uganda. They're all a little bit older. They're not little children. They're all a little bit older. They've only got a few years left in the Compassion Sponsorship Program. If you choose to sow seeds into their lives, I already can tell you what will happen. You'll see the transformations in this child. You'll see the transformation in their family. You'll see the transformation in their neighbours and in their community and in their whole church. And what is all this? All this is Jesus, who is more powerful than poverty. This is the church who is being more powerful than poverty. It's just a hope that we all have, which is more powerful than poverty. Thank you so much for letting me share with you today, even though this is a little bit unconventional. I hope you'll help me finish off by praying. Father, thank you that you are our hope. Thank you that you sent us Jesus to show us how to love one another, and also for his sacrifice for all. All of us, whether in Australia, Indonesia, Uganda, or anywhere in the world, each one of us, your unique creation. We pray we can be good stewards of our giftings and that we'll be active hands and feet for you. Help us to acknowledge the weeds in our lives and be the 4th seed that produces abundant crops for your kingdom and glory. Please be with our brothers and sisters in the developing world. Sustain them, especially at this time. And we pray hope for them, your hope, because your hope is more powerful than the poverty they're in. And we pray all these things in your name. Amen. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much for that, Emma. And I hope it's given us all something to really think about how we might be able to launch into something bigger than ourselves and even further than ourselves. Especially with all this coronavirus stuff going on, there might be some other way that we can support people who might be in worse situations than us. Now, because of our links with Uganda, Emma has provided us with 5 teenagers that still need support through the Compassion Program. So if you feel that that's something you would like to do, please don't hesitate to give me a call at the church. Their pictures will come up on the screen after this little talk here. And so again, open your heart, ask God if there is something that He wants you to do, if He wants you to support these teenagers for the next period of time in their life. Once again, thank you everyone for tuning in today. I hope you have a great week, and please just pay attention to social media, to text messages, or to your emails, and to your emails, and we will let you know how to connect with us next week for our next online experience. Have a great week.